It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Anyone can bake bread, but it takes something special to rock it. This is David Harrison of the Locked On Commanders podcast. This episode is brought to you by Dave's Killer Bread, champions of killer taste, killer texture, along with killer nutrition. Dave's Killer Bread is the organic bread you can eat on its own if you want to. Add your favorite sandwich fixings, and you've got yourself an elevated eating experience that you won't find anywhere else. So make sure you visit daveskillerbread.com to learn more and do what my family and I do. Look for Dave's Killer Bread in the bread aisle of your local grocery store. That's Dave's Killer Bread, bread amplified.
We got that Friday feeling, baby. The NHL's abuzz with all the fantasy news that's impacting your squad, and we're breaking it all down on today's episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Matthews 50-piece. What is going on with Freddie Andersen? And how about Mark Stone's latest injury? We're going to talk about all of it on today's show. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's get this paper.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everybody? Happy Friday, and welcome back inside the lab to your daily source for fantasy hockey news. It's the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Shout out to the everydayers. Shout out to everybody making us your first listen every single day. Steele and I couldn't be doing it without y'all, and that's why we're back, baby, doing everything and covering everything that you need to know that's affecting your fantasy squad. Freddie Andersen, Steele. This is a good story. Not a ton of fantasy impact yet, but it's a chance to talk about a player that could have impact down the stretch if he does return. We're going to talk about the Hurricanes as well. Speaking of which, Joseph Woll, much closer to a return and impact on your squad. Should you be owning him? Auston Matthews, 51 goals. We got to talk about it. And speaking of which, Mark Stone's injury. We'll break that down. Friday's 3-game betting board. Today's episode will be super short, my friends, but not short on the fantasy take. Steele. Freddie Andersen, it's just good to see a guy after 3 months, the blood clotting issues, just to see him back on the ice. And I'm telling you, already this team is cooking right now. This is going to do good things for their morale, and just having him back around the club for his team that is 8-2 in their last 10, Steele, can't help but feel good things going on in Carolina right now.
Yeah, it's honestly just very exciting to hear this. And, it's still probably a long way before we see him in game action. And because of such a serious thing going on in his life. Yeah. But it's just exciting news for Frederik Andersen and for us, because we've watched Frederik Andersen with the Toronto Maple Leafs for 5 years. And we know what he's capable of. We know what he's capable of with the Carolina Hurricanes.
Sure.
But so, yeah, for me, it's just really exciting news. And, I couldn't be happier for him that he's back on the ice and he's practicing a little bit. Yep. And again, like he's still probably a little bit of way to getting into game action. But when he's playing with the Carolina Hurricanes and he's playing the hockey, it's a great thing, because, we don't know how much longer he's going to be in the NHL. He is 34. He's 34. He's going to be 35,
Sure.
in 150 days. So you don't know how long, especially after something like this pops up in your career. So It's just great to see him back in action.
And with the Hurricanes sitting where they are in that Metro Division, 6 points back, Steele, this is actually huge news, because, like I said, look, Spencer Martin and Kochetkov are not exactly the duo that I think Carolina envisioned heading into the postseason push. No. So we know Ranta will be nearing his return over the next week or so. But Andersen even being close to the team is just good news. And I think if they actually do get him back, they're going to give him every opportunity to take that number one reign back, because, look, Ranta has had his up and downs this year. Kochetkov is the goalie of the future, but maybe he's still a year or so away to actually take those reins. He's been a little bit better over the last little while, but this just speaks volumes to how good this Carolina Hurricanes team is, Steele. They allow the least shots on net per game in the NHL. No other team is stingier. Almost 25 shots per game a night. In today's NHL, that's a crazy number. We don't need to talk about this anymore, because until he comes back, we'll have it covered. But today's episode, short and sweet. We got a lot more to talk about, including right away, Steele, Joseph Woll. And there isn't a ton here, and we'll talk about Matty after the break. But before we get there, just quickly with Joseph Woll, because I'll say this. This is my take. 8-5-1 this season before going down with that ankle injury. Obviously, he's been gone since December, I believe. Something like that.
Yeah.
And that's a serious injury to deal with. So maybe
it's been almost 3 months.
Yeah, almost 3 months. So I'll say this. The way he came into that Tampa Bay game right at the start of the year, Samsonov got pumped for like a third game in a row, and they finally just went to Woll in the middle of the game, and he brought them back, and they won a big game against Tampa. He's unflappable. It's his confidence in the crease. He came in the postseason last year. He won that game on the road against Florida. That was the only game they won in that series, and he was a main reason why. I love the moxie of this kid. And if there's a time to have a goaltender that isn't flappable and can do what the Maple Leafs need the most, Steele, say it with me, make that big save. The Leafs are a victim of getting dusted after building a big lead because their goaltenders can't make that big save. Joseph Woll is a big save goalie, and him nearing return means good things for fantasy GMs because he's immediately becoming a number one option, in my opinion. And number two, the Maple Leafs need him so very badly because as much as they have 5 wins in a row, check out Ilya Samsonov's save percentage over those 5 games, all south of 900 against bad teams.
Yeah, for me, I'm honestly kind of surprised that Joseph Woll's been out for this long. I didn't think he would be out for over 3 months. And, you know, maybe I was duped a little bit when I was doing some research about his injury because I thought he'd be back, you know, end of January, mid-February at the latest. Sure. But I never would have thought in a million years that I would want a goaltender who's only played 26 NHL games back so badly. Like, yeah. I understand, Ilya Samsonov, since he's been sent down to the AHL and then he got brought back up, like he's been playing good. And, maybe again, the save percentage hasn't been there over the last 5 games. 5-game win streak is still great. I've been starting to thinking, like, I love Morgan Riley, but are we sure we really want him back at this point? 5 games in a row?
Let's not go down that road, but I feel
that's incredible, but we won't go down there. But yeah, Joseph Woll, he's only played 26 games in the NHL, but I want him back so badly because I've seen what he can be, and I know you're on top of him because you drafted him in your keeper league. You're high on his capabilities, and just again, 26 games into the NHL, but first year he played 4, he had a 911 save percentage. Second year he played 7. Played 7 games. He had a 932 save percentage. And then this year he's played 15. He has a 916 save percentage. Like not a lot of, not a lot there to base it off of, but still it's great stats. And he's only played 26 games. So I want him back badly. I want to see what he can do for them. I want to see how he performs in the playoffs as well. And again, I'm just excited to get these goaltenders back in action.
Hey, you see the hue of the screen behind me. Obviously, we're excited to get Joseph Woll back, but that's not going to hide the fact that he still has to play behind the patchwork blue line that the Toronto Maple Leafs employ. They are not a Stanley Cup caliber lineup, Steele, but that doesn't mean they can't go into the playoffs and make some noise. So, I always say when people ask me on my Toronto Maple Leafs fandom, talk to me on May 1st, but we're going to talk about Auston Matthews right around the break very quickly because now this is getting into historically good things, Steele. And yeah, we're talking about the Leafs once again, which we have for a lot of reasons lately, but they've been in the headlines and we're going to continue to cover all of the top news from around the NHL in 30-minute shows so you guys get all of the fantasy takes and NHL news you need every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Indeed. Make sure if you need a hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. One of the best things about Indeed is that it makes all the hiring in one place so easy. All you need to do is make sure you are leveraging over 150 million qualifications and preferences every day. Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets for you. Listeners of this show right now get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support the pod by saying you heard about it on this show. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. You need to hire. You need Indeed.
Have you ever seen an NHL player get off a team bus and think to yourself, gosh, I wish I could dress that nice? Well, with Indochino, you can. Indochino makes fully customized suits that don't require a trip to the tailor to get that perfect fit. Recently, I was shopping for a new dress shirt for my upcoming wedding, and when I decided to go with the Hyde herringbone shirt, I was blown away at all the customization options I had. I could change the type of collar, cuffs, and even decide whether or not I wanted a chest pocket, all while being incredibly affordable, especially given the quality of the product I was getting. New colors, fabrics, and outerwear styles are added regularly too, so it's easy to create your next look. Level up your game with Indochino. Go to Indochino.com and use code NHL to get 10% off any purchase of $399 or more. That's 10% off at Indochino.com with code NHL.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Make sure you check out Locked On Sports Today on YouTube channel. They're here for you 24/7. You can also get it on Amazon Fire TV. They're here. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts, plus the national shows covering every single league. Make sure you go over there, subscribe to the Locked On Sports Today channel, and also check it out on Amazon Fire TV. What Leafs fans, what you and I are checking out almost every night, though, is Auston Matthews, Poppy, getting it done on a daily basis. It is absolutely incredible. Again, we were just talking about this the other day, but we got to bring it up because Poppy hits 50. He hits 51 in 54 games. He's on pace for 76. It is incredible. Again, we talked about that new little Arsenal goal scoring ability of his is just like along the boards, rifling it along the ice and just getting it, scoring from that crazy angle. And then when you're hot, you're hot. Like that, the second goal, his 51st goal, it bounced off his chest or his I don't even know what it hit off of. But when you're hot, you're hot. You can score from anywhere and from any body part, I guess. So it's absolutely incredible to see the history that we are witnessing from Auston Matthews right now.
Auston Matthews is up to a tied for 5th in points. And this is not a conversation that is just you and I like to have, because obviously we do. Check out the TV ticker. Check out the magazines. Check out Twitter. Check out everywhere. This is what everyone is talking about. South of the border, north of the border, wherever you're at, unless you're in some sort of deep, dark hole. This is just good for hockey, Steele, because you got Nikita Kucherov going, Nathan McKinnon going, Connor McDavid going, David Pastrnak starting to cook. And now you have special things coming from Auston Matthews. This is just good for hockey. That's number one. Number two, the other conversation that people continue to have, and we're going to keep this one short because you and I have talked all about Poppy, but this is what's happening with the Toronto Maple Leafs now. John Tavares value back up fantasy-wise. Peripheral pieces. I wrote about it this week for Dauber, Bobby McCann, Nick Robertson. Other of these peripheral pieces in Toronto are starting to cook because of 34. We've said it at length. Ad nauseum, perhaps. This team goes through 34. And think about it this way, and this is my last point because this is the main conversation. It's about that Hart Trophy, Steele. And if people don't start paying real attention to a guy who's already won it before in Auston Matthews, where would this Maple Leafs team be without Auston Matthews? They might be right in the gutter with teams like Ottawa and Columbus in the Eastern Conference. And I'm not just saying that for the sake of this point, because look at the MVP award, most valuable player to the team. You take Matthews away from this Leafs squad, they might be right there at the bottom of the barrel, Steele, and I think he deserves some real credit as being a true Hart Trophy threat once again this season.
I think it has to. Well, he obviously is, and for good reason. It's it is very tough when you have the season that Nikita Kucherov and Nathan McKinnon and even
he's a dark horse still, but he deserves to be in the convo.
He is definitely in the conversation. He deserves to be in the conversation. And he should probably be second right now on the Hart
I'll pull it up for us while you
continue
to talk on the odds.
51 goals in 54 games. He's on pace for 76 goals on the season. That'd be
on pace for 114 points. That would be a career high as well.
Career high points of 114. He's on pace for 76 goals. I believe that would be the most since, again, Mario Lemieux back in 1995, I think.
Sounds right.
Also, I saw this on Twitter. He hasn't even scored an empty netter this season.
Wow.
All 51 goals.
Wow.
5-on-5.
Great stat.
I think, power play.
Mostly it's been 5-on-5, which is even more impressive.
Yeah.
Anyway, We know what's
if you
good.
if you take away his power play goals, he's still third most goals in the NHL.
That's amazing.
It's incredible. It is
incredible
what he's capable of doing right now.
Yep. And just to put a bow on this conversation, because I think talking about Mark Stone is going to be an important one for a lot of fantasy GMs out there. And then we're going to wrap up today's show with Friday's 3-game betting board. Steele and I have had a really good week with the bets, by the way. So let's wrap it up with another winning evening. However, that Hart Trophy odds race, Nathan McKinnon at plus 160 for show. Nikita Kucherov second at plus 270, 100%. But who has crept right up there to third, Steele? Because now it's for real. Plus 300 for Poppy, ahead of Connor McDavid at plus 340. Read into that as you will, but it's just time to really pay attention to what is a historically good season for number 34. That's the fastest American-born player to 50 goals in the conversation around players like Brett Hull, Mike Modano, and a whole bunch of other studs. Anyway, speaking of which, we know Mark Stone has been a stud himself, Steele. Fantasy-wise, he fills out the Cats. On the ice, he's a leader. Off the ice, he's a leader. He's a warrior. He's a winner now, too. How about that? Also, 53 points in 56 games this season. He is now going to be, according to, is it Kelly McCrimmon? Who's that? The guy who they got the quote from? Kelly McCrimmon, general manager in Vegas, says, quote, on Wednesday, he will be out a while. Taking an upper body knock, Steele, Tuesday night. He left the game against Nashville. Nashville actually beat them in that game. However, he leads the team in points. What's your take on Mark Stone, the Vegas Golden Knights in general? Because we know this is going to be a team knocking on the door in the postseason. But Mark Stone going out right now, Steele, with the Canucks cooking and the Oilers nipping at their heels and the Kings on the rise, this Vegas Golden Knights team can ill afford to have one of their most important players out of the lineup.
Yeah, it's always tough to lose Mark Stone when you're the Vegas Golden Knights. He's been a part of their team since the beginning, and he's been so good for them, even with all the surgeries, all the injuries that he's had to go through. When he's in the lineup, he's one of the best players for them. I will say this, they've gotten by with a lot more players on the IR and a lot more regulars out of their lineup. True. They still have Jack Eichel out. They still have Ben Hutton out. They have William Carrier out. They have Mark Stone out now. They have a few more other guys. But they've gotten by this entire season with a lot of injuries. Aiden Hill was out for 2 months. William Karlsson was out for almost 3 months. Shea Theodore was out for 3 months. Like, this is a clearly banged up squad that is still able to get by.
Been that way too the last two seasons, it seems.
It has been. And look what happened last year. They get fully healthy in the playoffs.
I think it worked out.
And they win the Stanley. Yeah, it worked out nicely for them in the end. So it definitely is for fantasy GMs out there, it's definitely a hard blow at this point in the season. You don't want to lose this guy, and he might even be out for you for the rest of the league, if that's what Kelly McCrimmon's saying out there. So that's tough news if you're a fantasy GM who has Mark Stone, because he's been playing absolutely fantastic this entire season.
Yes, he has.
Like you said, 53 points in 56 games. I would love to see this guy play a full year. It doesn't seem like that's in the cards for him at this point. It just seems like something always comes up with Mark Stone.
It's a good point.
It's the same sort of principle. It's the same sort of principle when we talk about, Evgeny Malkin when he's injured all the time, or Max Pacioretty when he's been injured. When he's in the lineup, he's getting points. Max Pacioretty in his prime, not right now.
I get you. I hear the point you're trying to make.
Yeah, when he's in the lineup, you're getting the most out of him. So it's always tough when you're a fantasy GM, and especially if you're in the playoffs, you're fighting for a playoff spot, and you lose this guy.
Before we get to bets, I'll say this, 2 things. Number one, the Vegas Golden Knights hang their hats on their defensive play. And I think one of the reasons they've been able to get by with 5 or 6 goalies last season and key injuries this year to forward pieces is their blue line. That blue line is very well balanced. Steele, Alec Martinez, Pietrangelo, McNabb. We love Theodore. Even that last pairing, Whitecloud and Haig, that's a really tough duo to go up against. And lastly, with Mark Stone, he went out in a similar, not maybe this exact point in the season, but he missed a good chunk of the regular season last year. He was able to get healthy, and he was able to come back in time fully ready to go for the postseason. And he played all 22 games last year for Vegas, putting up 11 goals and 13 assists, and he had 2 game-winning goals. So if the Vegas Golden Knights feel that this is another situation where they're not going to rush Mark Stone back in any capacity. That's another one of those things, Steele, with fantasy postseason on the come up here. Keeping Mark Stone around and stashing him in an IR spot, or maybe sacrificing an IR spot for him in another position, and you have to drop a guy, that's where you're going to have to tap into Monday's waiver wire. Let us know in the comments if you're dealing with a Mark Stone situation and we can help you out. Hit the DMs. But I think, Steele, that's one of those takeaways here. You can't help but feel, knowing how good he is and important to the team, come postseason, they're not going to rush this guy back in any capacity to make sure he's ready to go come May.
They're going to make sure that he's fully healthy. They're not going to rush back. They're not going to take that chance with him. Completely agree with that.
Thank you.
Let's get over to big time bets, where the money is made, and then wrap up this show nicely
Sir.
for the weekend. This episode is also brought to you by Ibotta. Grocery bills are so expensive these days, but they don't have to be. Start getting cash back on your grocery shopping with the free Ibotta app and get cash back every time you shop. Ibotta is a free app that gives you the most cash back every time you shop on hundreds of items, from groceries to beauty supplies and everything in between. So you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. The average Ibotta user earns $256 per year. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip. So you can buy that flight you've been eyeing, that game you're dying to go to, or the fancy dinner you've been craving. Other apps give you the points that don't amount to much. With Ibotta, just add your offers in the app, upload your receipt, and you get real cash that you can cash out to your bank account, PayPal, or gift cards. Right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta by using the code LOCKEDONNHL when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back and use code LOCKEDONNHL. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store and use code LOCKEDONNHL.
Hey everyone, Chris from Locked On Avalanche here. If you like using debit over credit, I just learned about something that's definitely a game changer. Discover Cashback Debit. It's a checking account that rewards everyone with cash back on everyday purchases, which means you can get cash back on NHL tickets or head-to-toe hockey gear to make this season a total win. Check out eligibility and terms at discover.com/cashbackdebit. Discover Bank, member FDIC.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Continue to hit the subscribe, the follow button, leave a 5-star review. Appreciate all that love and support you show Flip and I Monday through Friday, 7 o'clock in the morning. Flip, big time bets. Let's try to rattle this off so we can get out of here, wrap this up for the weekend, and get everyone on the weekend vibes. 3 games on the schedule for Friday. What you looking at?
Steele, this is one of those tricky little boards that I would suggest dialing back your wager on, unless you've got some sort of sneaky suspicion on something that I don't see. However, something that I do see right off the bat is this Minnesota Oilers game. Number one, this should be a juicy one because both teams are kind of feeling it right now offensively. We know what just happened with the Minnesota Wild in the comeback against the Vancouver Canucks. Well, I don't even know what the total was. It 17 goals in that game, and then they come back.
It was 10-7 for the Minnesota Wild.
10-7, and then they come back and they get dusted by the Winnipeg Jets. So to me, they got to tighten it up defensively. One hundo, and you could say the same perhaps about this Oilers team because they've allowed 3 or more goals in the last 3 as well, including getting pumped. They lose in overtime, but still 6 goals is 6 goals. 6-5, I understand. However, it's got to be over 6.5 between Minnesota and Edmonton. I know the head-to-head numbers. 6 of the last 9 between these two have gone over the total as well. That's my first pick. My second pick comes from the same game, Steele, so I'm going to rattle it off very quickly. Connor McDavid is on a heater. This is nothing new. This is basically how Connor McDavid plays. He's almost always on a heater. So I'm going to go with what I've been seeing, and this isn't rocket science. Connor McDavid over 1.5 anytime points. He is no longer a player where his prop is at an anytime point. It is always over 1.5. In 21 career regular season games against the Minnesota Wild, 24 points for McJesus. Those are my first 2 picks. I didn't want to go with the same game parlay, Steele, because I really couldn't find another pick that I liked from that game. However, the Wild are, I think, 8-1-1 in their last 10 against the Oilers, so a little food for thought there.
Yeah, definitely a little food for thought there. Yeah, I've got 2 picks from this game as well. I've also got the Oilers Wild over 6.5.
Got to be done.
Gustafsson and Fleury have just been a little bit shaky, and Skinner hasn't been on the top of his game as well the last 3 starts. So I'm going with the over 6.5. I am going to take the Oilers on the money line in this situation, just because it's in Edmonton, and again, the shakiness of what I've seen from Gustafsson and Fleury over the last little bit. So I'm taking the Oilers money line. I'm taking the Wild Oilers over 6.5. And then my final pick here, I'm taking the Jets on the puck line against the Blackhawks. I'm hoping for a big game. I know Connor Bedard's back. I know he's been absolutely stellar since coming back from injury as well. Good, yeah. But I'm taking the Jets on the puck line for juicy odds.
He actually burned me on Thursday night by not getting a single point. That was gutless. But anyway, back to more positive news. The Columbus Blue Jackets and the Buffalo Sabres. I know it's an ugly looking one, but the total has gone over the number in 6 of Buffalo's last 7 trips to Columbus. By the way, my lock of the night was the over in that Minnesota-Edmonton game. I'm just firing off my last pick here because this just screams over to me, Steele. And then you look at the last 9 games between these two, 7 of the last 9 have gone over the total. Buffalo, Columbus. Yeah. This has got to be an over. I'm feeling 2 overs tonight. Sometimes my brain gets away from me, but I like going to totals. I like going to overs. If you're not feeling the over 6.5, cop out, drop it down to the alternate total at 5.5 and slap it into a nice little parlay, Steele, and thank me later. This one's going to go over the number, though. I'm feeling it. But the lock of the night is the over in that Minnesota-Edmonton game. That one should be goals aplenty.
Yeah, I like the over 5.5 in that game between Sabres and Columbus. It brought, I like the over 6.5 too, but you never know with some teams that it could be a little bit of a low scoring game. I like all those 3 picks for Friday. There's only 3 games on the board. Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Thank you for tuning in for today's episode with Flip and I. Have a great weekend out there. Good luck with all your bets, and we shall see you back here again on Monday.
Peace.
Luxury is meant to be livable. Discover the new leather collection at Ashley with premium quality leather sofas, recliners, and more, all built to last. No matter how many spills, scuffs, or pet-related mishaps come its way, the leather collection at Ashley is made with the durability you need for the whole family. Shop the new leather collection at Ashley and find chairs starting at $499.99 and sofas at $599.99. Ashley, for the love of home.
Hey, Prime members, you can listen to this Locked On podcast ad-free on Amazon Music. Download the Amazon Music app today. It's prime time in the NHL. Stay on top of all that's happening with the Locked On NHL podcast. Every Monday, Gil Martin rounds up the 3 biggest stories around the league, including the nail-biting action, drama on and off the ice, and trade deadline rumors. From Seattle to Tampa Bay, Las Vegas to Montreal, and everywhere in between, Gil Martin covers the league on Locked On NHL. Available on YouTube and wherever you get podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.